All right, there we go. And we're recording. Are you good, Thomas? You recording?
Okay, we're all set. We're all here. How you doing?
All right, I'm doing good. How you doing, buddy?
Good. I just want to say I'm honored for you having me be on this interview with you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, man. It's great to have you. So everybody, this is Thomas from Talks with Thomas. He's got his own YouTube channel, so you can go check him out. And he's also an educator. So that's what this video is all about today. We're going to be talking to an educator and seeing what the force is like, the education force is like. Education force. I don't know if that's the right phrase, but whatever
Yeah.
the synonymous phrases for workforce for education. That's what we're going to talk about today. Thomas just graduated recently, so he's been teaching for about a year now, and that's actually I see that as a positive because even though he might not have all of that teaching experience as some older teachers might have, he is freshly in the game. He's freshly educated. So this is like the best we've got. No
That's it.
pressure.
Right out of the system, ready to go.
Exactly, exactly. So, with that being said, right out of the system and ready to go, I guess the first question I got for you is what are some of your main criticisms for the system? Whether that be the system that turns out teachers? Yeah, I guess we'll start with that. What are some of your main criticisms for the system of developing teachers for the education field?
That's a very good question, and I'm going to answer that question, but we're going to take a little turn. But you're going to see how
Okay.
it's going to all come together. So the first thing we talked about the system, correct? The system for education. A lot of the system for education is dependent on our society and our government. I'm a supply teacher right now. I'm going to have my class one day. That's my goal. That's my dream. But as a supply teacher, I have the privilege of seeing many different schools in many different areas and going to them. And I've noticed in some schools when they have resources, government support, depending on their socioeconomic status, that collective area, when there's more governmental support and resources, the kids, the students, the whole collective atmosphere is more pro education, more valuing it. They're more happier. Everybody's more at ease. I've been to other schools where they don't even have technology in the classrooms. The schools, the wall, the paint is coming off on the walls. So when your school itself is falling apart, what does that say to the children, to the students? We need a more systemic, harmonious agreement to have all of our schools have more resources for our students, because then if I'm a student going to a school that's barely very underfunded, my chance of opportunity compared to someone else going to a heavily funded school, it's already an imbalance. So then it becomes a question of character and heart. How badly do you want something? But yet, we're not talking to our students, many teachers, about what they want to do in life. We're regurgitating the curriculum a lot, which is important. It's important to learn a variety of things because you want to figure that out for yourself, right? But now, when you have to figure out what you want to do for your own life and you're underfunded and you're in this atmosphere, your chance to succeed compared to the other schools with the funding and all that talk in that atmosphere, it's an imbalance.
So you mentioned you're talking about like the kids trying to figure out what they want to do with their life there now. I guess in my mind, I was thinking you were talking about elementary schools at first, but then when you mentioned that point, that made me think you're talking about high schools as well. Now, is that in both cases, it's the funding is dependent on the location, like it's more municipally decided rather than federally in the case of elementary schools and high schools?
Sorry, repeat the question.
Yeah, so the funding making the difference depend like the kids being subjected to different resources. Is that the case in both elementary schools and in high schools?
Yes, that's the case in both elementary and high schools. And thank you for clarifying that, by the way. When I talked about kids wanting to decide what they want to do for their lives, that is geared more towards high school. But I also think it's important to even plant that seed in elementary school, especially for grade 7 and 8s. because many children are picking the high school dependent on where they think they want to go and what they want to do. Every school has a different atmosphere and a culture and a lot of different tools to bring to the person.
Yeah, that's a good point. I myself went to a high school that was, I was in a regional arts program when I went to high school because I thought I wanted to develop a career in music. And that's not the route that I chose to go in. But I'm happy I did go to a high school that was focused for me personally on a music program. But that's a good point, that that seed could be planted in elementary schools as well. Like I never gave any thought to that when I was a kid until I got to, you know, the later years of high school, when it comes time to decide what like degree program do you want to go after, what college do you want to go to. And in some kids situations, it's like, do you want to go to school at all? Do you want to go right into an apprenticeship in a trade? But I feel like I never gave it any thought right up until I felt like I had to. And then it became this thing that was like pretty anxious for me. And I know that I wasn't alone in that. There was a lot of people that I went to school with felt that same way. And there's this common like idea that it's almost ridiculous that we have to pick what we're going to do for the rest of our lives when we're like 17, 18 years old. But if you start to think about that earlier on, and you start to kind of, you lay the field for the kids in a way that they can explore different areas earlier on as well, maybe perhaps like more in depth, I could see that being a really positive thing. Now, you said something also that I wanted to circle back to. You mentioned that the schools with more funding just seem to be like more pro education. I thought that was a funny term because that's like the point of school itself is, you know, to educate. But being more pro education, I'm curious as to like where that word choice comes from. Do you actually see in the younger kids in like the elementary schools that have less funding that there's just like a lot less learning taking place because of where they're at mentally?
Yes and no. There's a lot less learning taking place, to answer your question, because they don't have the proper tools to do some of the lessons and the materials. So let me give you an example. Let's say I want my students to do a research project. I want them to start to browse the web. Perhaps this is it could be even a grade 5, 6 class. They're getting used to the web, internet, researching, finding credible sources. I want them to kind of go into that area. But the school has provided me as the teacher 15-year-old Chromebooks that take half an hour to start. How are we going to do this then? Okay, take out your phones. If you have a phone, now it's if you have, right? So take out your phones then. But what's on the phone? You got your games, you got your social media. So there's a lot of distractions at play when we don't have the proper tools and the proper things for our students. There's some projectors in the classrooms that I've been to, they're half broken and they don't even project on the screen. So how can I do a lesson? I can still do a lesson, but how can I bring new innovation, new engagement, videos, different ways of learning when we have material that are 10, 15 years old and it's not being changed? So it does affect the learning. And then again, remember how I mentioned how it comes to a question of the heart now, like how bad do you want to get perhaps this good mark, or how bad do you want to think about your life? If it's not being promoted and talked to you, it's not in your awareness. There's no seed planted.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess if we want to propose a solution to that issue, going back to the resources, the fact that schools are left to their devices for funding on like a municipal level is clearly not the best arrangement, because then you have this issue, this like classism that's taking place. So I don't know about you, but me personally, the first thing that comes to my mind on that is more funding on a federal level that's not discriminating based off of where the school is. That way, the school is not left up to the region to get the funding. It's federally funded.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
It becomes a human right for equal opportunity now. This is what we're
Right.
talking about, because we have our rights, our basic needs, but I think education across the board should be a basic need for all our students, regardless of if someone makes 100 grand or they make 30 grand.
Yeah, whatever the family income is, the average family income in that area shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
And
then
there's a lot more,
go ahead.
sorry,
Sorry.
and there's a lot more elements at play to student learning too, because some poor students, they don't have, not only the resources, but they don't have sometimes a full family household with supporting parents to even help them get into that mind frame. So imagine as a teacher now, if you're trying to really make an impact on your students, but then they go home and there's not even parental support. So for this whole value of education that we're talking about to be changed and evolved in the more harmonious way we speak of, it needs to involve the teachers, the government, their parents, like the whole society needs to be in on this. We all have to agree, or else there's just going to still be imbalances everywhere.
Right. And that's where growth is. The change is a process, and growth is a process that happens a little bit at a time, because you have that issue of kind of wanting everything to be on the same page before we can take a step forward. And obviously that's no easy task, which is why we have like our government systems set up the same way or the way that we do, rather, because if we didn't, we wouldn't really get anywhere. If you needed, 1,000 out of 1,000 people to agree that this is the way that we're going to do it. So better
Yeah.
off you have 501 agreeing, okay, this is the best way, then you explore that way. But even, yeah, it's because you mentioned, like, imagine the kids going home and now they don't have parental support versus the kids that are going home and they do have parental support. Obviously, that's a big advantage for those kids. Those kids are a lot more set up for success. So to have like a more egalitarian playing field, if you will, more level playing field for kids that don't really have as much support at home. Well, firstly, we got to make sure that they're having equal support in all schools, no matter where they are, which is where federal funding comes into play. And that's important. If you're watching this from Canada, if you're watching this from Ontario, guys, it's very important. We got elections coming up. Take a look at the policies of government parties. Certain parties are more likely to be giving to the education sector, and certain parties are more likely to be taking cuts on education, which, if you ask me, that's like one of the silliest things that we can cut funding for, because education is literally our future. Like the most valuable resource that we have is the children of today. So that's just a little side note to be mindful of that when casting your vote for the next election. But so that would be, I see you cracking a smile over there. That would be, the best solution to the funding thing. But what do you think is a good solution to subsidizing, if you will, the support or lack of support that some kids might have at home? I know there's like various programs. Something that comes to mind is like the Big Brother program. I'm not familiar with that, but like, what do you think of that? What do you?
Yeah, so for that's a hard question for me personally to answer. I'm not really sure. Because when we get into this subsidizing and we get into how can we fund poor families and all this, it becomes more of a governmental policy base. And just my field of expertise right now is just solely in the classroom. So in terms of, I'm advocating for resources and more of that, but myself, I personally need to do more in-depth research and talk to more people about that, because I can't give a confident, concrete answer on how we can reform some of those policies. But I notice it.
You notice that that issue is there.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. I like that you're humble and honest in your response there. I appreciate that. That's a good sign. That I'm happy to have you in the classroom with today's youth.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So that brings me to the next part of that question then. So that's some of the main criticisms there. We're talking about funding, but what about some of the things that you think that we're doing well and that we can continue to do well? What are the things that, really get you happy to see when you're in the classroom, that you think, oh, we need more of this. This is something that we're doing good on a systemic level.
So when I completed my practicum placement, the things that we're doing well. So I notice a lot of our questions, which are good questions, right? But it's the way the public would think, the whole. What are we doing well? I've noticed in the education field, a lot of what we do well and what we do unwell, a lot of it is very subjective. So let me give you an example, right? One of my mentors, my first mentor, I'm not going to name any names or anything, but the first mentor I went in with my first placement barely taught me anything. And I had to somehow survive and self-teach everything on my own. I really didn't learn much at all.
You were left to your own devices a little bit. Yeah.
Yes. My second mentor showed me how to properly assess, how to properly create lesson plans, how to gauge different student energy levels. So a lot of the training, what we're doing well, is dependent on the mentors in the classroom. So just to redirect your question, what are we doing well and what can we improve on? I'm going to add to this. I think, because there's no screening for mentors, I think if you want to be a mentor, you need to be screened by your profession, because there are teachers out there who are mentoring students and are not putting half the energy involved to helping that student grow into a teacher. So I think it first and foremost starts with the already teachers mentoring to then mentor their students to become better teachers, and then it trickles down from there.
Okay, so that's still, I guess that's still one for the main criticisms column then. But that's a very important thing to bring up. Yeah, like screening for, having like a bit more of an objective. We want it to get like as objective as possible, anyways, to screen for teachers that are going to be able to add value to new teachers. So that's like when you were still being educated yourself. The quality of educators can vary, as you just said. And I'm sure that's the case for a lot of kids in the classroom as well. Like not just screening for the teachers that are going to become mentors to up and coming teachers, but even just screening for teachers themselves. So I guess that brings us to what you have to go through and what you had to pass to become a teacher. So I guess a question comes to my mind now that we're on this topic. Did you feel what you were tested on was, or like, the process that you had to go through to become a teacher yourself? Do you feel that there was some areas that could have been improved upon? Like, do you think, was there ever a point where you thought, hey, like there's some people that could be getting through this that I'm not really confident in to have teaching in, in our youth in today's day and age? Like maybe you felt that way about some of your peers and your classmates that graduated with you, or like, I'm just curious.
So because I want to go back to the other question we talked about, what we're still doing well. So I'm going to keep that.
Yeah, let's bookmark that. Sure.
But also, you said, did I notice anybody who may not be qualified who's passing the program?
Yeah, like, do you feel that there is a bit of like where in the qualification process could use improvement? Like, do you feel like, if anywhere, do you feel like there's some people still that are becoming like they're getting their certification and qualifications to be a teacher, and now they're in the classroom with kids that you feel like maybe that person's not equipped to be in the classroom? And if so, if that's the case, where do you feel like we can improve that like qualification and screening process?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to answer it as best as I can and remain on thread with this. So from personal experience, there's 2 years of teachers college. The first year is pretty much all theory, but you learn in the second year that all your theory.
That's post-grad, right? Sorry to cut you off. That's after you get your undergrad, then it's 2 years of teachers college?
Yes, okay. Yes. So the first year, it's a lot of theory. Pretty much 90%, I'd say, is all theory. But then when you get to second year, you realize, oh my God, there's a kid screaming in the classroom.
Yeah.
That's it. It doesn't really,
they don't tell you about that in the textbook.
They don't tell you about those things in the textbook, right? They give you, the lesson plan template and some of the bylaws and the regulations and how to act and conduct and assess. But when you're in the classroom, all the theory gets thrown out the window. You need some to help ground you, of course, but I learned so many different things just being in the classroom, right? So to your question, who have I noticed that needs to perhaps be more qualified in what we can do? It's very unique. So for the teaching profession, it's very subjective. So I would say personally, if you don't have the genuine, sincere heart to be in the education field, to really evolve and improve our system and our society and bridge the gap for more harmony and student opportunity and success, then you're doing a disservice. That would be my thing. Because on paper, everyone's doing the correct things to pass. There's no unqualified teacher. We have evaluations, we have examinations, we have supervising help, third-party interventions to help train us, right? So the wheel is still spinning. It's not being reinvented. But now it's a question of your heart and your character. Because if you don't have those qualities, a lot of students are going to be suffering. What do I mean by that? I mean, if you don't really have the heart for your students and your profession, you're not going to notice the little things when a student may be feeling a different way, or a student perhaps slipping on certain things, noticing uncommon behavior traits. This is all from the love of the job. And these are all things that aren't on paper, that aren't taught to you. You can't learn on paper in the school system how to intuitively feel the energy of the class. Perhaps when I was doing a grade 4 class, when the energies were really, really high, I would say, you know what, guys, we're going to put the lesson on hold. We're going to do like 2 Just Dance videos. We got to dance and get this off. Sometimes they were exhausted. And I'm like, you know what, let's just take a 5-minute like mental break. But this is through intuition and through proper mentorship. So what can we improve on again with these qualifications? Better screening for our mentors, and then it becomes a personality thing if you have the heart for it.
Yeah. Okay. So the biggest takeaways there would be like set better screening for the mentors, because as you said, in the first situation, you found yourself with a mentor that was pretty much leaving you out to dry, leaving you to your own devices, and then you got so much value from that second mentor. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I'll tell you what the first mentor said, just so the viewers have an idea. The first mentor told me, in quotes, "You are like a blank quiz." And you know what a blank quiz is? A fail, a 0. That's what the mentor told me. We have on paper in the education field, growth mindset versus fixed mindset. The mentor's got to adopt a growth mindset.
Yeah, that seems like a very rigid, like fixed mindset that they have. And that's so funny. That's like because obviously if they're your mentor, them telling you that you're a failure is a reflection of them. So the fact that they're just blindly not seeing that tells me that whoever this person is probably not the best educator as well.
And I don't want to generalize all mentors. There's amazing ones. I've had amazing ones.
Yeah, for sure. Like it just goes to show that, like you said, like that somebody with a fixed mindset like that, and it's not recognizing the projection of their own shortcomings. That's a teacher who would have a class full of students who might fail the test and then blame the students. And that's like the most blind thing that you can do as a teacher, because if there's 30 kids failing your test, whose fault do you think it is? Do you think it's because you got, the dumbest 30 kids in the province? Or do you think it's because you sucked at teaching them? It's more likely that you didn't do a good job at teaching them. So
yes.
Very important for that mentor screening to take place, as you said. Yeah, you were going to say something?
Yeah. I didn't want to lose this. I wanted to piggyback on what we're doing well, because I don't want to have this whole theme on the problems with the education system.
Not talk about what we're doing well. Yeah. Okay, bookmark remembered. We'll go back to that bookmark in a second. I just wanted to wrap up the second point you had that just escaped me. We were talking about the mentors.
The mentors, 30 kids in the class. It's not the student's fault if they all failed the test.
And then what else were we getting on about there? I just wanted to make a concluding point there.
I think I stole your thought, my friend.
That's okay. It's okay. It'll come back.
Okay.
And if it doesn't, that's fine too. The intuition and the passion for the job. So your message, I guess, like to conclude that point, your message to people out there would be, if you're not somebody who's genuinely passionate about furthering education for today's youth and, you know, bridging the gap for young kids and helping them to become successful, you're really just going to be doing a disservice to the field of education. So if you're somebody who's just showing up for a paycheck, choose a different profession, I guess would be your message.
Exactly. And then just to add on to that, right? Well, how do we teach passion? So this is more into the high school sector. We had careers and civics class. I remember going through those and learning about all these different options and all this. But the teachers never, although the curriculum was taught, I was never really targeted as an individual on what's my strengths, what are my needs, what can I excel in, what am I good at, what do I like. Although we're teaching this curriculum, we can also add some additional things to our lessons. I'm not saying that this isn't being done. I'm going based on my own experience, but
maybe it should just be done a little bit more. You're saying
more. It should be done more,
especially in the high school level.
Yes, a more collective agreement from everybody to talk about these things. I know me and you and our friend group, we talk about the Myers-Briggs test a lot, the 16 personalities. I don't see one student taking that test at all. Perhaps utilizing the student with that test can then let you know their pattern behaviors, their strengths, their weaknesses, and you can alter that towards something they like. And of course, well, how are you going to like something unless you try it out, right? But the whole point of this is to plant seeds, planting these tools, right? So the plants grow. You're not going to water a plant and then pull out the roots to see if it's growing properly, right? So growth happens slow. You water the plants, you plant the seeds, and you have faith.
Yeah, and I guess the whole point of that too would be like giving the seeds to the students, so to speak, and letting them see which ones they would like to continue watering based off of their own individuality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I know, like coming out of the education system myself, just as a student, that I think could have been done a lot more and would have been really helpful, not just for me, but, you know, for the collective student body. So I guess on that note, then we'll go back to our bookmark of what is it that you see that we're doing well, or let me refine that from that we're doing, like, what is it that you see we're doing well? It's like, in your opinion, what do you think is in the approach or even in the curriculum right now that is really beneficial for the students, whether it be beneficial for them at finding their own individuality, beneficial for them just creating a better learning environment, whatever it may be? What do you think is really helpful, really great to see for the students that we can be doing more of? Just in your own opinion.
Yes. So what I've actually seen, and I'm learning even today, is we're taking a more, again, seed planting. We're more equitable. We're taking a more diverse and an inclusive perspective. So what do I mean by that? Remember how I brought awareness to the unstable equity with students? Right. That's having awareness planted on that as a system. Diversity. We are now learning about different cultures. So how do we incorporate diversity in our classroom? When a student is learning about perhaps their own culture or their own self-interest and personality, things they like, they are more inclined to learn about the subject. So for example, for one of my lessons when I was doing grade 4, it was grade 4 dance. And I said, you know what, let's have the students, if they want, they can bring a dance from their own culture and show it to the class, right? And they can get marked on the presentation on just their own participation mark, something small, but I want their engagement to be utilized. So rather than just saying this dance does this, salsa, I don't know, tango, tap dance, all these hip hop, it's like, no. What dances do you like? What do you and your family do? Your culture, and show us, educate us. You be the teacher. So sometimes for my students, right? I'll give you another example. This all ties in together. Don't mind my rapid speaking. So we were doing a science lesson on the different types of animals. I said, you know what? Instead of always just lecturing on the stage and telling them everything, I put them in groups. I set up different stations and I said, okay, this is the elephant, this is the bat, this is the dolphin, this is the bear. And there was a description on them all. I said, you're all going to work in a group and you're going to teach it to me. So they all got together. They all figured out their group leaders. They read it all. They put down what they thought was important, and then they presented it to me. So they taught themselves. So that's one of the good things I notice in our education system today. We're giving more responsibility to the students rather than the teacher being the sage on stage. We're giving more, we're giving more responsibility to the students, more critical thinking, more reflection. So, yeah. And it's happening in front of my eyes. So that is, I'm not taking that away from at all on the system. They're doing
that's a really good thing. And I guess the fact that you're saying you're not taking that away from the system means, I guess that was in your curriculum when you were learning the best ways to teach. Is that something that was taught to you? Like, is that something that all up and coming teachers are being taught to utilize, or was that just like your own good approach?
Well, again, right. So you're going to see how all these lines intertwine now. Thankfully for my mentor, my second one, who was amazing, she told me, Tom, stop lecturing so much. Maybe get some of the students to get more engaged and try. So my mentor gave me the insight.
So that was something that you learned from somebody in a teaching position teaching you. So hopefully there was a lot more people like that for your classmates that, like in Teachers College, that got that same high quality mentorship. Hopefully we can hope that that's the case. And that's like that's a really good approach. That's really empowering for the kids, like giving them more responsibility in that way. I noticed you said like when they were working amongst their groups, you're kind of letting them sort out like their own leadership roles. And that's really good. That's like what I like to think of as, there's weightlifting, and then there's bodybuilding, and there's like functional weightlifting, which is you're not just doing your rigid movements, you're moving in dimensions that are going to mimic real life. And that's learning in a way that's going to mimic the real world. When these kids are all grown up and getting out there in the workforce in the real world, they're not just learning to regurgitate information. And, there's a time and a place for that in the education as well. But they're also learning how to like functionally apply what they're learning and do so in a way that's empowering. I just wanted to wrap that up. Go ahead.
Yes, I don't want to interrupt you. So one more thing, we're talking about what we're doing well. Differentiated instruction. That's one of the key themes we learn as a whole for students going into this field of teaching. So there's different types of learners. There's visual learners, there's auditory learners. So visual seeing, auditory hearing, and kinesthetic, so feeling and doing. There's also different students with IEPs, so individualized education plans, some who are more advanced, some who are not meeting the average, right? So based upon all these different types of differentiated instruction, different learners, by knowing these all, we can then pinpoint which students excel in which, and we can create and tailor lessons that are best suitable to their learning needs. So one good thing perhaps is for a project, for maybe a speech, a research thing, anything like that, the teacher can have multiple options. So maybe you don't feel comfortable saying a speech in front of everybody. Okay, that's fine. I remember when I was a kid, my teachers would force everybody to go up on stage, and some students would just freeze and be terrified, and the teacher would be like, speak! And it's just like,
not a very conducive learning environment.
No, but provide options such as maybe, okay, if you're very, very afraid to do a speech in front of everybody or present, make a video recording and show the class. You can do it at home. So just having options for different types of learners, right? Not everybody's going to be one way of learning. You have to differentiate the instruction for each, while also caring and pushing everybody to learn simultaneously.
Okay. That's interesting. I remember, grade 4 to 8 was like the years where you'd have like your speech. There's like a couple weeks where everybody would like put together a speech. I think it was maybe like a week or two actually, and then we'd all present them. And that was like, that's a very memorable part of like my early education. Now that you're saying that there's like options on that now, and I'm interested to hear what you think about what's going on in my mind right now. There's a part of me that thinks that that's a really good thing, that kids that are absolutely petrified of, getting up in front of the class and speaking can have a different option, and they can go ahead and record their speech and then present that to the class instead. A part of me thinks that that is really good because like the kid is not going to learn how to become a better public speaker by getting up in front of the class and just freezing up, because what that does is create a negative experience for them. And now the next time that they're faced with that, it's just going to be even more intimidating. So part of me is thinking, yeah, that's a really good option to have. But is there like a weaning in process, so to speak? Like, is there like an integration process from going to like the video, for example, to the live presentation? Because there's another part of me that is in opposition, that is thinking, just because the kid is afraid of doing a live presentation doesn't mean they should be excused from it. I think there should be a way for them to be supported and to learn how to be a little bit more comfortable, at least comfortable enough that they could get up in front of the class and actually speak. Maybe they're still scared. Maybe they face that fear though, that, they're just less scared to the point where they can actually talk in front of the class rather than just being petrified. And that would be a good learning opportunity for them. That would be a good way to grow for them, by kind of like facing that fear in a way. So that makes me think of like that. We hear this phrase like the snowflake generation, where everybody's like kind of soft and just, well, oh, it's okay. You can go to bed. You can go to bed if you're tired. Where it's like, oh, back in my day, there's no nap time. So yeah, I'm curious what you have to say about that. Like, is there an integration period? Because there's a part of me that's like on either end of the spectrum. I have mixed feelings about that approach. So what do you think about that?
Yes. So the integration would be, so if let's say I have a student who's petrified, can't speak on stage, they'll do their video recording. I'll say, okay, Jimmy, let's just give Jimmy an example. Hey, Jimmy, at recess, stay in for 10 minutes. I want you to present just to me. Nobody's going to be around. Just get up, go on stage for them to get a feel of it. Go on stage and just on stage in front of the classroom.
Yeah.
Just present to me, right? If they're still uncomfortable doing that, then I would call home and I'd be like, maybe I'll talk to one of the parents. I'd be like, maybe they can present in front of you so we can then cultivate this skill. Let's start planting this seed, because in real life, like in reality, we're going to be dealing with people in the workforce. You have to socialize, right? You're going to have to take some leadership roles. You're going to have to present. So this is a life skill. So if my student was completely petrified that way, I'd say, okay, I'm going to call Jimmy's parents. And then if the parents weren't even supporting at that point, there's only so much you can do. But you have to just keep trying. Growth mindset, right? You have to keep trying. Okay, come on, let's try that. Try tomorrow. Do maybe a 2-minute presentation. You just gotta keep trying. This is when the heart comes in, because then you get teacher A who's like, I did X, Y, Z. I tried. I give up. But then the one who cares a lot would be like, okay, well, we're gonna keep trying here. And then if like you do everything you can, you don't want to get diminishing returns too, because you can't, what's the saying? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink, right? So as long as we're giving the students all these tools, we're leading them to the water, then I think that's a success, because ultimately you don't want to coerce people on top of that now.
You don't want to put the horse's head underwater.
Yeah, you want to find that balance between both. So yeah, that's personally what I would do. And a lot of teachers do that too.
Okay, that's really good to hear. Yeah. That's an amazing approach. I really I'm glad that I just heard that from you, because like you said, you have some teachers that might just like be willing to give up on the kid. I hope that's an underwhelming minority, because You know, and in a perfect world,
Yeah.
every teacher is a teacher that's not going to give up on a kid. And that's going
Mhm.
to keep trying, and even if they're not getting the returns. And that can be a hard thing for a teacher to do too. You might get discouraged. I can imagine if you're not seeing any results from the kid. But that's like, that warms my heart to hear that the approach is like you said, coming from that growth mindset. And you might call home, see what's going on at home, try to get the kid to present in front of his parents, maybe if he's uncomfortable with presenting just to you. But I love that approach, and I love that to hear that the majority of teachers aren't going to be giving up on the kid that way.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I don't want to create this light that education and teachers need to be improved and need to be. No, we're just talking for the sake of our video here, things that are doing well and things that can be improved on. Because I don't
Right.
want to create this dichotomy and this generalization that it's terrible. No,
Yeah.
I've met so many amazing teachers who give their soul and their hearts to the job, and they really, really care, right? So it would just be unfair for me to portray that image of them and the system that it needs to be reformed and there's so many problems. No, because the biggest problems we've been talking about is the lack of resources combined with parental support and combined with screening of mentors. Those were the top three keys we were talking about. And again, not to generalize, not all of them are bad, not all of them are
Yeah.
wrong, but there's a few, right, that people experience. And it's important to shed light on them because some people, some students might be turned away from the profession because they might not have the best mentor looking out for their best interest.
Yeah. Yeah. True. So it's important to, yeah, that's a good thing to shed light on, to your point there. And to your other point about the biggest thing that you were saying about the room for improvement is really like the funding and the resources that are there. Um, and that makes me think about how many kids are, like not happy in school and not thriving in school. Like I remember I started to put the pieces together when I got more interested in just like human behavior and psychology when I got into high school. And I started to realize, okay, I see this trend, and I've seen it since grade 1, where there's kids that are really quiet and really to themselves. And some kids, they're just like kind of growing into themselves a bit when they're younger. And then they become more extroverted and more willing to talk. But there were some kids that are just like really quiet, really to themselves. Um, you can sense that there's like something going on. And I'm sure you see this with kids too. And you probably see it more so in the schools that are in the areas that aren't socioeconomically doing as well. And that just goes to show like how much the funding, like a lot of it is about the kids' environment at home. And the environment at home, I'm sure there's a strong correlation with like the better the economic situation is at home, the better the overall situation is at home. Whereas kids with environments at home that aren't going so well, and it might be filled with, some trauma, those kids probably aren't doing so well in the classroom. So that just goes to show like how much of a systemic issue and like how integrated all these issues are
Yes.
of, if we want to improve the education system, improving like the economic system as a whole would have
Mm-hmm.
like this trickle down effect that would inherently improve the education system like from the inside out,
Yes.
without even inherently changing anything about the education system itself.
Bang on. Exactly. Exactly. Some students, they don't even have a printer at home to print. You know what I mean? So it's like like you said, all these systems are intertwined. So there's this public misconception that the teachers are doing this in the education system. But it's like, listen, man, perhaps even the news outlet could spread more light on this. It's not only the education system, it's the whole system as a whole that's helping and intertwined with one another. Like you
Yeah.
said, the economy, the economics, the funding, even if you just change that without even touching the school system, it'll be massive improvements.
Yeah, for sure. And that really like, oh, I had a point. It just escaped me. What was I thinking of?
You want to come? I'll talk about something. Then while you
Sure.
want
Do
to
you have a thought? Yeah, go ahead.
have a thought. So we were talking about how putting the importance of what kids want to do in their life, students, and how do we teach passion? How do we teach what you want to do, for example. So I'll give you a personal event from my high school classroom. I was supplying a grade 10 classroom. It was grade 10 religion. And I was overhearing the students talking about the importance of their marks. My mom wants me to get this 90. Oh, I'm at an 87, but I want to get to 90. Oh, I got a 75. I'm not good, this and that. A lot of their self-worth is judged based on the marks. So I told the students, I'm very honest with them. I told them, I said, honestly, boys and girls, shoot for the stars in terms of your marks. I'm not saying not to. Don't misinterpret what I'm going to say here. Marks are very important, but you don't want to get caught in this rat race of competition for who's got the best marks, and the best marks make me the smartest, because you're going to end up taking a program, perhaps if you go to university or college or whatever you do, you're going to be so fixated on marks, you're going to graduate, get the best marks you can get, and then you're going to do a job you hate.
Yeah. And that's accustomed to the fact that they're going to pick the program based off of, if they're the kids that are striving for, like, you know, anything less than 100 isn't good enough, and they're not happy with their 96% average. That's the type of child that's coming from a family that is being indoctrinated to believe, like, you should be doing the program that is most economically lucrative for you. So if subjected to that family's opinion, that's engineering, the kid might go become an engineer or a doctor, or, you know, any of the stereotypically, like, really successful practices, because they think that's what's best for them, because maybe it's going to cut them the biggest check or whatever. But, like, to your point, if you don't actually care about it, if you're not passionate about it, that $200,000 a year salary or whatever you're making after you get your doctorate, that's not going to serve you as much as living a passionate life. You're still going to be an individual who feels fundamentally empty for not offering what you feel is your fullest passion and your most authentic gifts to the world.
Yeah.
So, to your point, how do you teach a kid? I think I forget what your wording was, but it made me think. You said, like, how do you teach a kid passion? And it made me think, well, really, how do you teach a kid to find their own passion? Because passion is something that is intrinsic. Like, we know it to be true in and of itself, but we first have to know how to, like, explore ourselves. And that's something that I know, and maybe you can validate this if you feel the same way, but I feel as though that's something that's lacking a lot in the system right now. Not to just keep up with this theme of, like, oh, it sucks, this and that. But that's something that I feel could use a big improvement, is, like, teaching kids how to get to know themselves and really, like, self-reflection. And the fact that that's not currently in the curriculum, or currently something that's common practice, for me, that probably has to do with the fact that society as a whole, and, like, a lot of the teachers and just most people don't really know themselves too well. So that, I think, will come into the curriculum more as it evolves on a collective level. As that permeates, like, the collective consciousness, it'll be commonplace in the classroom, I think. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you said it good. You said what you touched on points that I was keeping in my mind, just in case you didn't say, about the collective. So just to defend my teacher colleagues here, right? how to teach passion in this. There's a fine line between how much you think you can teach, for example, for passion. Because remember how I talked to you right now about the grades and to find your passion. And we just talked about that, right? Some parents might get really, really upset with me saying that, right? So then, again, it stems into the home life. So there's, again, how much can the teachers do? The education system, this and that. We can do a lot. We can stretch. But then when the kid gets home and the parents are mad and all this, we need, like you said, a collective agreement on what we're going to be talking about and what we're going to be teaching. Because without this collective agreement, if the education system wants to be progressive and push this passion, and all the parents and guardians and other people at home who aren't in that field say, no, it's going to be a tug of war, and then the kids are going to be so confused on everything.
Yeah, and they're right. They're the rope, right? It's gonna be a tug of war, and the kid is the rope. And like one person's trying to pull the rope that way, one person's trying to pull the rope the other way. The kid gets all the tension, and that's not good. We don't want that. That reminds me of I don't know if you've ever watched the film A Dead Poets Society. You ever watched that movie? Great film. I highly recommend it. It's an old one. I think it's like from the 90s, early 2000s, something like that. And I actually watched it in high school in my grade 12 philosophy class. That's when I watched that movie. And what you're talking about there reminds me of a scene where it's Robin Williams is the like the protagonist in the film, and he's teaching at a boarding school that's very much about like discipline and you know, stereotypically like trying to indoctrinate these kids to become the cream of the crop of society. And you know, like overachievers, this type of thing, right? And Robin Williams is there telling the kids, he's like, it's his first year teaching at the school, and he's telling the kids all these unconventional lessons that otherwise the school would not be teaching them. And it's very like valuable lessons like the dangers of conformity and the importance of authenticity and doing what's true to you. And one of the kids ends up, you know, like a lot of the kids, you can see it throughout the movie, that are really affected by his lessons. And one of the kids follows his advice, and he goes to be in a play, in like a community play. He gets the lead role in the play, and he does amazing. And he has to hide it from his father because his father wants him to be a doctor. And he says, you're not doing too much extracurriculars. It's going to take you away from, you know, like chemistry class, physics class, this kind of stuff. So when his father finds out, he went and like took the lead role in the play, and he did a great job. He shows up to the play on opening night, and after the play's done, he like takes the kid to the car, and everybody's telling the kid like, oh, you did a great job. And the father's just like not having any of it. He doesn't care. The teacher comes and sees the kid, and they have this like split second where it's like a heartfelt moment. And the teacher tells him, he's like, I'm so proud of you. Like, you did amazing. Like, and he's about to like really just like open his heart to this kid, tell him how proud he is. And the father's like, he gets in the middle of them, and he's like, are you the one who put my son up to this? You stay away from my son. You don't ever talk to him again. And he puts the kid in the car, and you just see the kid, like they're driving away in the car, and the kid just looks like so miserable. And the father told him like, you're not doing any of this nonsense. You know, and the kid has like aspirations to become an actor with his life. Like that's what he wants to do as a career. But his dad wants him to become a doctor, and his dad's like very strict. So he says, you're going to military school, and you're going to be a doctor, and like that's it. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts. So his dad's like a bit of a drill sergeant. And in the movie, the kid ended up taking his own life because he was so like he was so crushed by this, you know, like he wanted to do what he wanted to do, but the parents had something else to say. And it's a great movie. Anybody watching this, I recommend you watch that movie. A lot of great lessons in that. But that just really reminded me of that. And it's so important. Anybody watching this, if you have kids or if you're going to have kids one day, like it's so important to understand that those kids are their own human beings. Like they are their own autonomous beings. We can influence them, but it's important to ask yourself, are you influencing them in a way that you see is going to be best for them? Or are you projecting your own beliefs onto your children? Are you trying to steer your life or their lives in a direction that you might have tried to steer yours? It's so important to let the kid be authentic to themselves. I'm not saying don't teach your kid and don't, you know, tell them what you think is best. But at the end of the day, you know, especially like 17, 18-year-old kids, you'd be surprised at the quality of the decisions that they can make for themselves. So just ask yourself where your own advice and where your own projection is coming from. Ask if it's like a projection that's just coming from your unconscious mind onto them. It's just a little side note I wanted to put on there. But yeah, so important.
I agree. Yeah, so we talked about a lot of key themes, a lot of critical aspects. And just to hammer this message home one final time. So remember how we were talking about curriculum reform and what to teach the kids and this and that. So we talked about what can be improved on. We talked about what they're doing well. And I want to touch upon this whole thing one last time, where what to teach our kids we need an agreement as a whole society, because the education system, the teachers can only teach so much until the parents push back and say, I want my kid learning only this stuff. So we need to all harmoniously be in agreement with how we want our future generations to go. And the education system is a servant for the people, for the society. That's where I find my role, right? I find my role as a teacher is to make the atmosphere open-mindedness, safe, happy, fun, engaging. School doesn't have to be this miserable place where all you do is sit in a desk all day and you learn and you can't wait to get out. School can be a fun place. So again, to talk about the subjective part as a teacher, go into this profession if your heart is in it. Make that environment amazing for your students. And we pretty much talked about a lot of those topics, right? Yeah, that's the thing.
Sorry.
Yeah, just to finalize my statement and conclude it, a lot of the questions come from the public, such as, again, right, the whole. What can teachers do? What can the education system do? What can we teach? What can we talk about? Every individual has their play and their answer for that question. It's not only the education system. Everyone has an answer and an influence on that.
So it's really a matter of like trying to find some harmony and some balance between that. As you said, like it's about getting on the same page. I guess I have a thought about that. I think the thing is if you have people trying to, when you're trying to get everybody on the same page of where do we want to go, what do we want to teach, what direction do we want to go in with our education system, the way that psychological development works tends to have an expanding circle of concern as generations pass. And psychologically, the development seems to just get higher and higher. Like, I'm not saying kids are like out psychologically developing their parents like as a 20-year-old compared to a 40-year-old, but the odds of when the parent is 50 versus when their child becomes 50, that child, when they're 50, their chances of being more psychologically developed are very high compared to when their parent was 50. That's just the way it works. You could look at, for anybody that might object to this, you can take a look at spiral dynamics. That's a very accurate model of psychological development. And I guess my point to that is for some people that are a little bit further behind in their psychological development, they have some values that we might think are a little bit questionable, even borderline like sexist, racist, stuff like this. If everybody getting on like the same page, what am I trying to say here? How do we get on the same page if we have like a more progressive view and we're saying this is the direction we should go in with our education system, should be more inclusive, more diverse. And then you have, if it's like a big proportion of the public opinion being on those less psychologically developed pages, so to speak, of no, I don't want my kid learning about this. I don't want my kid learning about this. Well, like, how do you manage with that? Like, what do we do with that? How do we try to get on the same page there?
And that's, you know what, and just to piggyback off your statement with that, so what the good thing is, when I was applying in a kindergarten class, I noticed the baby dolls were all dolls of different cultures. There was a white baby, there was a black baby, and there were other different types of babies. And it was amazing because the whole class was a multicultural class, so they could identify with their toys that way. To talk about, I don't want to go too deep in this one, but just to shed light on this, for example, the LGBTQ community, right? Do we now teach our kids that, do we bring that into the curriculum where you can have same-sex marriage? Because then other parents who are very disidentified with that, who don't agree with that, will get mad. But this is the way our society is going. Acceptance, inclusivity, it's all fine, right? But the schools haven't necessarily bridged that gap to teach about same-sex marriage and all that. And then now we have to think about this fine line where it's like, how do we implement that? Do we implement that? what's the controversy? How do we bridge this gap, the conflict? So it gets very sticky, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Don't have we? I guess we just kind of don't really quite have answers to that yet. That one's a work in
Yeah,
progress, I guess. All right.
exactly. I just wanted to bring
Fair
that
enough.
topic up because this is a reality. There are people who are in same-sex marriages, and there are kids, students, high school, elementary,
Maybe
I
their
don't know.
parents are of same sex marriage.
Exactly. Maybe their parents are of same-sex marriage. So when you're only learning about one particular thing, it might conflict with your values, right? So it's just like, how do we create this harmony for everybody? Very difficult questions that take a lot of contemplating and a lot of thinking before implementing.
I guess
But
our democratic system is like the best approach that we have for that so far in like a political sense. And there's an interesting point to be made, or an interesting like argument to be made about implementing the same sort of thing on a level of policies as well, not just of politicians, but like leaving the public up to having votes on policies. Now, I'm not sure what the economics are behind that. That might be very unpractical in terms of how much money that would cost. But it certainly is more along the lines of a more true democracy. Um, so that's something that I would be open to experimenting with as a public, and kind of just seeing like, does this work? Is this effective? And I think that's like the approach that we should be taking more with a lot of things, is not so much being rigid about them. Like if I come up with a policy as a politician and implement it, in most, and like the way things are right now, I'm going to like stick to that policy and ride it out because it was mine or it was my party's. I'm going to be identified with it. But I think a more healthy approach is to just be okay with like implementing it, seeing, is this effective? Is this not effective? If I was somebody who was against it, but then I see that it's effective, I shouldn't still be against it for the sake of being against it. I should recognize, oh, this is a very effective thing that's healthy and in everybody's favor. Sure, let's keep it. And if I was the person that implemented it and I see, oh, this actually isn't so effective, I should be open to saying, okay, let's scrap it. So that's something to be said about rigidity and flexibility. So yeah, I'd be open to something like that, especially like when designing the curriculum. It would be interesting to see like what direction things go. Okay, so let's get off that topic. I wanted to ask you before we wrap up. I have some statistics that I want to pull up. I'll share my screen with you here. Share screen, desktop, share. Okay, so I have some statistics I wanted to share with you. We look at this table 1 over here. This just shows that from 4th grade to 8th grade, the level of happiness that children report that they feel at school declines from about 50% if we look at the all or most of the time. 4th graders are happy all or most of the time, 50% of the students. And then by 8th grade, that declines to about a quarter. So it goes from half to a quarter. That's a considerable decline. Why do you think that is? And what have you observed that in the classroom yourself? Like, what do you think that's all about?
yeah, I have observed this in the classroom. I've taught from kindergarten all the way up to grade 10, supplying in those classes, and I've had my own practicums where I've, for the whole month at the end of the semester, have become the teacher for grade 3 and 4, and I've ran the whole classroom with everything. And what I've noticed is, and I've also supplied in grade 7, 8 classrooms for weeks at a time while I was supplying. So what I've noticed is students, when they grow up, they care a lot more about the marks. I don't know if this is the core reason. Again, everyone has their own family life, their own things they're dealing with. But in terms of the happiness levels, the fun of school gets kind of taken away as you progress in the older grades, due to just more importance on the marks, on the testings, getting into a good high school, thinking about what you're going to do with your life. It becomes more real, and decisions have to be made quick because you're all going in. So I notice a shift within the kids, perhaps in grade 3 and 4. where they might get maybe a 62 on a test and they laugh with their friend who got a 70. They're like, you got a 62. It's like, it's okay, whatever, right? Some of the kids will do that. But then in grade 8, it's like, oh my God, I didn't get an 80. My mom's going to kill me. And it's becomes very serious. A lot of that could also be some of the teachers too. I don't know how they'll teach their classroom, of course, but maybe perhaps they could cultivate a more happier atmosphere, because the statistic says 50% of the happiness drops. So when I think about this, perhaps it's the classroom atmosphere combined with the home life, combined with the importance of getting good marks. There's a lot of factors at play here. So
fundamentally, it sounds like what you're saying is like, if we have to take one extraction from that, it's just that the overall energy towards school itself is a lot heavier, a lot more serious, and a lot less playful.
Yeah.
There's something to be said about that, with the way that we live our lives, just growing up as humans too. Like, we go from children to adults, and we tend to lose that spark. We tend to lose that joyousness. And there's a quote from, I forget who it is. It might be Ram Dass, who talks about how it's the first half of our lives. Like, we spend our early years learning how to go from children to adults. And then we should be like spending, I forget exactly what the quote is. I'm butchering this, but the next half, or the later half of our life, should be going from, we try to learn how to go from an adult to a child again. And he's not saying, forget how to go to the washroom and wipe your own ass. He's saying you want to get that childlike essence back. You want to be regrounded in the fact that the essence of life is playful and joyous, which can be hard for a lot of people to see and believe when they're submerged in all the heaviness of the life that they find themselves in, right? Like, if they're struggling to pay bills, if they've, got a whole lot of responsibility that they didn't necessarily like think through too much or really want to sign themselves up for, but kind of did, or even the responsibility that none of us sign up for, but we just have, like keeping ourselves well and healthy and happy. It can become a little bit daunting. So I think it's really important with that statistic and with that observation that you just shared, that we try to accentuate keeping it light and staying in, this kind of sounds like woo-woo now, but keeping the energy, keeping our childlike essence throughout life, and especially throughout our years where we're learning to go from a child to an adult, because that's when we lose that childlike essence, because we think, oh, this is what it is to be an adult. And then it's like, oh, this isn't as fun. But in actuality, it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, I still feel like a child all the time. I still play and laugh, and it's great. And I see people, very successful people on a, financially successful level that are still have that childlike essence that can play and laugh just the same. So I heard you say, when you were talking about the little breaks that you'll take, where if the kids are full of energy, you'll kind of just like take a break and do a couple just dance videos. I think that's amazing. I think we need like more stuff like that. That keeps it light. That keeps it playful. So I was really happy to hear you say that.
Yeah. You know what? School's not just about, this is my pedagogy, my philosophy. So just to make that clear, School is not about solely academic. It's also about well-being. It's also about socialization. It's also about harmony, bridging that we think school is a certain thing. It entails everything. School is life before life.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. And how do teachers set the tone for this lighter, happier statistic to go up? I say, really take the growth mindset seriously. If a student is devastated because they get a 65 or a 50 or they fail, you know what? Pull them aside if you don't already do that and say, listen, you know what? Out of 0, you got 45. That's great. Now, what did we screw up on? What mistakes did we make? Let's reflect on that and let's learn from that. And you know what? If you're really, this is what I would do personally. Again, I kind of want to set the precedent for all this, but you know what? If you're really trying and you really want to reflect on the mistakes you made, I'll give you a retest. I'll change up all the questions. I'll give you a retest with that newfound knowledge. Give them a second chance. show the growth mindset. Let them see tangible results instead of just 45. Okay, unit's done. Next unit.
Yeah, like keep it light. Let them know that it's okay. And even if you don't want to give them a retest, reassure them that there is another unit, you know, and that like it's
Yes.
not the end of the world that they didn't get the best mark. It's just one class or just one test. I know some teachers will have like I've experienced this where some teachers have had like the opposite approach where it's really like I like this this idea of like a fixed versus growth mindset, because some teachers have like that fixed approach where it's like, oh, you know, like this isn't good that you only got a 65. Like you're really not doing well. You should study harder for the next test. Then it's like the kid is not gonna thrive off of hearing that.
And
Especially
also,
because like you said, that you're just feeding fear with more fear. You're feeding anxiousness with more anxiousness. You got to keep it light. You got to let them, reassure them it's okay. At the end of the day, like a lot of these kids are 10 years old. I remember being 10 years old in classrooms, and like we said, I want to reiterate this again. It's not all of them. Overall, I had a really good experience with my education as a child. But I remember some teachers, it was like, I don't think they realized I'm 10. I'm like, that kid that they're yelling at across the class over there, that's a 10-year-old. Like, this is craziness. That this is how a grown adult is interacting with kids that are 10 years old. So I feel like it's so important just to remember that and to keep it light. And that just goes to show that lightness, that like joyfulness that is fundamental of life itself gets dimmed out in so many people, including a lot of the teachers, unfortunately. But like I said, a lot of teachers made a huge impact on me. I still remember them, and I wish I could call them up and go catch up with them. And I'm sure you are that teacher for a lot of young kids. So like I said, very, very happy that you are teaching today's youth, my friend.
thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate that. And just to finalize and piggyback off that point you made, again, by keeping it light, some students, some kids excel at math. Some are better at English. Some are better at dance. You got to find their strengths and utilize their strengths. And it's the teacher's duty to find the weakness to apply that growth mindset. Because especially with math, so many people, even today, you hear adults, I'm bad at math. It's just a belief in your head. You know, if you really work hard at it and you sincerely want to improve, you can do it. I had to pass they got rid of it now, but there was a government math test.
I remember you telling me that they got rid of it, which I think is ridiculous, but go on.
They got rid of it, right? So me, I always had this belief of I'm really good at English. Oh, I'm terrible at math. I'm terrible at math. But guess what? I spent 5 weeks. I studied and I learned the math. Now, I forgot it, but you can learn. You can learn it. You can. That's what we got to put more. You can. And to those who do, 10 of 10, thank you. But to those who don't, start instilling more that you can. This isn't only for teachers. This can be for parents, society, anybody. Start instilling this even for yourself, your own mindset. You can. You choose it.
Yes, it's a choice. You can. Fundamentally, you can. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Why don't we end off there? That's a great way to end it. I want to thank you for your time today, Thomas. I'm going to let you plug your YouTube channel one more time. So, guys, you can go ahead and subscribe to Thomas's YouTube channel at Talks with Thomas, right?
Mm-hmm.
For this Talks with Thomas, you can go ahead and subscribe to him over there. He's got a lot of great content. And, thanks for your time today, Thomas. Really appreciate it. Nice talking to you. And I'll see you in the next one.
All right. Take it easy.
Take care, my friend.